Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun, Episode 8, The Prince, Girl of the School's Problems. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. The episode begins with Kashima complaining to Mikoshiba about how Hori's been cold and distant to her lately. He doesn't answer her calls. He doesn't come after her as often. He isn't as hard on her during rehearsals. And she's, getting depressed about this. And Mikoshiba says, well, that just means he's losing interest and you've got to up your appeal and push harder. We then have Hori helping Nozaki and Sakura with the manga, and he's depressed because he feels like Kashima's been harassing him lately a little more than she used to, and is a little bit more annoying. And then we fast forward to school where Kashima is trying to skip rehearsal, and Hori throws his bag at her. And once he throws his bag at her, the manga that he had annotated for backgrounds to make sure that he's consistent falls out, and she sees it, and she's like, oh, this must be one of those occasions where people try something new and different. And then she sees all the annotations. She's like, wow, he put a lot of effort into reading this. And basically then Hori catches up with her and she puts it back into his bag, but goes out and buys the same manga to look at and try to figure out why Hori likes this manga so much. So she then consults Mikoshiba, and Mikoshiba suggests that the point of reading a manga is to identify with the protagonist. And so she starts to wonder if maybe Hori wants to be Mamiko. And then Mikoshiba makes a comment about the flowers, and she wonders if maybe it's like a guy's Bible type thing. So then she decides to go and ask Nozaki about it. And of course, Nozaki also works on the manga. And so she's like, what do you think about when you read this? Or have you heard of this? And he says that he has. And she's like, what do you think about it? And then he, of course, goes over in his head how, as the author, he'll realize, oops, didn't finish that subplot, forgot screen tone here. Oh, that was a great storyline I did. And so he then gives her more of a complex answer, and she once again is like, wow, this manga must be like something the guys are so into. Well, then they get to practicing and rehearsing for the newest play, and she's playing the prince, and she basically, to test if Hori wants to be the heroine or heroine, she asks him to do lines with her, and of course he's very passionate about the lines, and then he gets really excited because she's finally putting in the work and effort. So he starts to tear up a bit, and she thinks oh, he's so happy to be playing the girl's role. Then the girls, of course, come and interrupt, and Hori gets angry at her, and she thinks that he's jealous. So she tells the girls to step back because Hori's going to be jealous of them, and the other guys in the club have to hold him back because he's just angry. And then, of course, they then have a meeting to determine the roles, and Kashima suggests that Hori be the princess for the upcoming play, assuming again that he wants to play the heroine. And he basically gets really angry. And then she basically also then decides that he wants to be a girl and gives him day by day little pieces of an outfit that actually end up well coordinated. But essentially, he complains about this to Nozaki and Sakura. And that's our first half of the episode. Then the second half of the episode, we have Hori's starting to think that there's a few too many backgrounds. A lot of the chapters have had a lot of backgrounds recently. He's not necessarily able to keep up, so he's encouraging Nozaki to try to draw his own backgrounds. And then basically Nozaki does give it a try, but then one of the characters looks like they're floating, so he decides to give them a box. Then he starts drawing a bunch of scenes, and every time that the proportions look wrong, he's like, "Oh, this character's on a box. Now these characters are on a box. The only character that's not on a box is this one." And then when Hori's like, "Where are all these boxes coming from?" He writes a scene where Mamoko's holding a box, and in her speech bubble, "Boxes have become really popular with us lately." Which is hilarious. So then they decide to kind of like a still life painting where you're painting what you see. Maybe they'll take pictures to try to allow him to just basically draw the picture. However, height-wise, proportionally to Mamako and Suzuki, Sakura fits more with Hori, but then they're both too short to play the characters that like Mamako and Suzuki, who are taller, so it doesn't work. So then Nozaki goes and gets boxes for them to stand on to lift them up to the height that they're supposed to be, which of course annoys Hori Senpai. And then they basically he then spends the night drawing a lot of backgrounds for Nozaki, falls asleep during his like the meeting and rehearsal of the theater club. And then while they're on a break, someone needs to reach something up high. Well, Kashima needs to reach something up high. And so she stands on a box, and half asleep, he's completely triggered by boxes at this point, and he basically yells that he told him not to stand on boxes and kicks the box out from under her. And of course, things fall down. He ends up injured. Kashima then decides once again to go back to him wanting to be the heroine again and decides that she's going to Princess carry Hori to the nurse while he is unconscious. And basically, the entire club is like, "This level of harassment is too much. Don't you dare." So she decides that she's going to be a horse instead of the prince. Like, if she can't be the prince, she's going to be a horse and take him to the classroom, except she mixed up the horse head with the bull head and ends up being a bull instead. As she's walking past the window, she realizes that she is a bull, not a horse, freaks out and starts running full tilt to the nurse's station. And then Hori, of course, wakes up and is on the back of like a bucking bull, and it's hilarious. Obviously, I'm laughing already. And basically takes them. Eventually, they reach the nurse's station. She reveals herself, and he thinks that this is inspiring. So at the end of the episode, he says to Nozaki that he will continue to draw all of the backgrounds Nozaki needs, but the next script that Nozaki gives him should be about a prince who gets turned into a bull, and that the reveal should be flashy, having gained inspiration from that ending. And then we get the post-credit scene, which is basically Sakura asking Hori if he ever, because like he always gives Kashima the male roles, if there was ever a point where he had not noticed that she was a girl, and he then flashes back to basically meeting her and like looking up at her face and saying, "You'd make a great hero." Then like in the changing rooms and everything, thinking again, like looking up at her face and not even realizing. And what made him eventually realize that she was actually a girl was when she went to go into the girls' bathroom and he was heading to the boys' one, and then he was like, "You're a girl? Like, since when?" And it's just a funny little scene at the end to round out this episode. Now that we've summarized the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our two lists, our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, and then the personal ranking, which of course uses my opinion to determine the score. Alright, so for our mostly objective rank values, I didn't feel that any of the negatives applied to this episode, so we're just dealing in positive points. And our first positive point is +3 for an impactful slash memorable moment slash line slash etc., which for me is the box saga. So usually I consider something to be impactful or memorable if years after watching it, if you're thinking about the series and maybe wanting to watch it again, and it's like what scenes stand out in your mind, Much like the Tamada saga from earlier, this saga, the Box saga, also very much stands out in my mind as one of the most memorable storylines, and that is why I'm giving it 3 points. I would like to honorably mention the whole horse and bullhead thing. I think that was absolutely the funniest part of the episode, but it doesn't really stick in the head for like future episodes. Like if I hadn't watched the series in a while, I would completely forget that moment, even though it is the funniest point in this particular episode. That's why I'm not giving it points, but I'm honorably mentioning it because it was really funny. Anyways, that's 3 points for the Box Saga, and then an additional 4 points for the multi-episode main character development, which is the fact that Nozaki can't draw any kind of background. Earlier in the series, it was kind of hinted that Nozaki can't draw houses because there was that whole competition or game that Nozaki, Mikoshiba, and Sakura played, where they each drew a different items and they all ended up failing at drawing a house. However, that was just a house. He still might have been able to draw forests or pathways or, you know, indoor scenes. Like, there wasn't really confirmation he can't draw any of the backgrounds. It just meant that he couldn't draw a standalone house. So this time in this episode, we are actually confirmed he cannot draw backgrounds at all of any kind, and he can't figure out how to draw them with characters in place. It'll look like a character's floating or too short, too tall, standing above, standing below, so on and so forth. Like he can't get the 3D space visualized accurately. And so that, of course, is a new development, something that we've learned new about Nozaki, and so that brings us to a total of 7 out of 10 for this episode. So our season 1 rankings so far and our mostly objective ranking, in first we have This Love, is being turned into a shoujo manga. Say hello to the new heroine. The Man Who Envisions Love, I'll cast a spell on you. There are times when men must fight. This episode comes in 6th, The Prince, Girl of the School's Problems. 7th, Violence versus the Prince. And then the manga artist's brain, Nozaki-Kun in 8th. So for this episode, I had a great time watching it. I thought both halves of the episode were funny. The second half I'd say was slightly funnier, but I think both halves had a lot of comedic elements to them that were successful. I liked how everybody seemed to have, like, whenever they were talking to Kashima, we would hear their thoughts, and then we would hear how Kashima interprets their thoughts, and it always seemed to be at kind of like a cross purposes. And then, of course, we had the Box Saga, which is memorable and personally very amusing to me. How Nozaki decides that rather than actually try hard on learning backgrounds, he'll just compensate for his weakness by adding boxes to everything. And then, of course, Hori being so upset by this that he ends up like triggered half asleep and kicks the box out from under Kashima, actually ending up injuring himself. And then, like I said, the whole Kashima first wanting to be a prince and Princess carry Hori to the nurse's office, that idea being axed. So her deciding that, well, if she can't be a prince, she'll at least be a beautiful white horse that Hori can ride to the to the nurse's office, and then walking past the window, looking at it, realizing that she is a bull and not a horse, and then freaking out and running like full tilt all the way to the nurse's office while like Hori's like flopping around on her back. I don't know. That is one of the best scenes. Like I said, for whatever reason, it's not memorable. Like I've watched this before and I completely forgot about that moment. But now that I have seen it again, I think that it is absolutely the best moment in this entire episode. Doesn't win out the whole Box Saga, but for like a singular moment, funniest by far. And that's why I decided that I was going to give it an 8 out of 10. It's by no means the best episode, but it was comedic start to finish, a great time to watch, and had some strong scenes. That brings our personal one rankings, or not personal one, our season one personal rankings to, in first, There Are Times When Men Must Fight, Say Hello to the New Heroine, I'll Cast a Spell on You, The Prince Girl of the School's Problems, This Love, is being turned into a shoujo manga, The Man Who Envisions Love, Violence versus the Prince, and then The Manga Artist's Brain, Nozaki-Kun E8. Bringing us to our final segment for this video, and that is our series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking for season 1, we have 61 points out of 120. And then on the personal ranking side, we currently have 59 points out of 120. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun Episode 8, The Prince Girl of the School's Problems. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.